Well, joining me now from Canberra, Australia, retired Australian Army Major General Mick Ryan. He is the author of the book War Transformed: The Future of 21st Century Great Power Competition and Conflict. Good to see you again, sir. When you look at what's happened in Mariupol, it's hard to think of a worse thing to do even in war than bomb a maternity and children's hospital. What do you draw from that kind of act in the context of the overall conflict?
Hi, Michael. It's good to talk to you again. Well, what I draw from that is the Russians are getting desperate. Putin's war plan of taking Kiev in a fast, cheap, and easy war in 2 days has failed. He has now committed 100% of his ground forces to this war. It's very difficult to see how the Russians can maintain momentum in the east, in the south, and in the north at the same time. So they're resorting to these kind of tactics to terrorize Ukrainian civilians and the Ukrainian government into some kind of political accommodation.
Do you get the sense that, despite what Putin's plans were before the invasion, that we might end up in a situation where there will not be a military solution to this, that the mistakes and miscalculations mean that, even if Kiev falls, there is nothing decisive about the conflict. It will go on.
No, I think you're right, Michael. I don't think there is any longer a military solution where Russia wins this. Even if they capture Kiev or Kharkiv or even Mariupol, they're capturing rubble. The Ukrainians have not given up. They have plenty of heart. They've got a large country to defend, and it appears to me they're going to continue doing that, regardless of how many cities they lose in the east or the north.
I know you said, and I think it's a very good point, that this war has provided two very different examples of leadership in this war, and perhaps, obviously, the underestimation by one of those leaders of the other, President Zelensky.
No, I think so. We've grossly overestimated the strategic nous of President Putin. He's got all his underpinning assumptions about this war wrong. President Zelensky, on the other hand, is the exemplar of a wartime leader. And I would say that many leaders in the West have looked in the mirror and asked themselves, would they pass the Zelensky test?
Yeah. What then do you think are President Zelensky's challenges ahead, and his generals, both in terms of how he defends his cities militarily, and also in terms of how he fires up his troops and his nation?
Well, he's done a pretty good job of that so far. Not only has he fired up his troops and his people in the Ukraine, he's fired up the international community in a way we've not seen in a very long time. So he needs to continue doing that. He'll be getting fatigued, and there are Russians and other mercenaries out there trying to kill him. They need to keep Zelensky alive because he has become a symbol of hope for his people and indeed the international community. He has some big decisions to make about does he stay or does he leave in his city, as well as about places like the east where the fighting is very hard and he may have to withdraw some forces just to save them.
Yeah. Already trying to pull back forces of Ukraine that are operating on UN missions abroad. I think one of the most striking things has been that, obviously, as we've discussed, if Putin thought this would be easy or his troops would be welcomed, he could not have been more wrong. I mean, these images that we've seen of not just Ukrainian troop successes, but the people, ordinary civilians, literally standing in front of Russian troops and armour, telling them to go home. And again, even if the Russians prevail in a military sense, the war will not be over in terms of what will be a hostile population. Would you envision that switch to insurgency?
Oh, I think so, Michael. I mean, the bravery and the resilience of the Ukrainian people has inspired all of us over the last 2 weeks. It's been tremendous to see that. I would anticipate that any area the Russians might occupy henceforth, there will be some form of insurgency. Indeed, the Russians have been terrible at securing their rear areas during their advances, and Ukrainian territorial forces and civilians have really made them pay for that. I expect that to continue.
Yeah, as you and I have discussed before, taking territory is one thing, holding it is very much another. Got to leave it there. Retired Australian Army Major General Mick Ryan in Canberra. Really appreciate it. Always good to see you.
Thank you, Michael. Stay safe.